Welcome back to Crossing Barriers, Building Friendships. Our guest today is Janet Arning, who is the Inspiritus Regional Director for Middle Tennessee. And Janet was also with Inspiritus in Middle Tennessee back when it was known as Lutheran Services of Tennessee. So before we get into all the amazing ways Inspiritus is helping others, we first have to talk about the journey of the organization, because I think that makes what you are doing today all that much more amazing. Since 2001, I've been aware of the organization, but for about the past 10 years, I've been involved as a board member, as a Bible study teacher, as a volunteer, and now I serve on the advisory committee. And maybe between the two of us, we can piece together Inspiritus history. For those listening, can you share how Inspiritus Nashville beginning as Lutheran Services of Tennessee, and tell us about the services Lutheran Services of Tennessee provided?
Sure. Thanks for having me on and looking back over these past 10, 11 years. I appreciate all the ways in which you were involved to get us to this point of not being in a survival mode, but in a thriving mode. So, the history of Lutheran Services in Tennessee, I think is a 97, 98-year-old organization that began in East Tennessee with the William Henson Home for Boys. And that was a vital ministry connected to the Lutheran congregations in this area for many years. And at some point in the history, things changed. You didn't have children in group homes anymore, and children started being raised in families, as is often the best way to have kids being housed and raised. And so there came a point, and I'm not sure the exact date, that ministry closed. Things were moved from East Tennessee. Hard decisions made at that point to bring things into Middle Tennessee, and there were several different ways in which we were serving Middle Tennessee. I know that there was a help house and disaster response work. And so by the time I came on in 2010, we were basically down to the tail end of the March flooding that happened in 2010, and bringing in volunteers to rebuild houses at that point. So in 2010, I came from a 20-year tenure at Second Harvest Food Bank and feeding programs into our Building Healthy Families program that we started for and with the women living in the North Nashville community of Cheatham Place. Cheatham Place is an MDHA housing community, and we started off with a parenting program, kind of partnered with St. Paul's Lutheran Church on the corner of Rosa Parks and Garfield Boulevard, right in almost downtown Nashville, and invited women to come and just be a part of something new, something that they could come and have lunch and have an educational portion to that time, learn from each other, grow from each other, be able to help their families by picking out things out of a caring closet that had household goods in it, and praying together, being together and learning together. And we've done that since November of 2010.
One of the things that I am so excited about is that, in part, your mission statement says that you help those that you are serving go from surviving to thriving. But actually, the organization itself has gone from surviving to thriving. When I was aware of Lutheran Services of Tennessee back in the early 2000s, there were two things that were huge barriers. One was that there was a lawsuit that it said in residential facilities, instead of having the ratio of 1 staff to 16 residents, that had to go from 1 staff member for every 8 residents, which really changed the financial dynamics of the services for residential services. The other thing that happened is I think close attention was not paid to the finances of Lutheran Services of Tennessee, and it was in a hot mess financially. And it became important to close down. There was a residential facility in Clarksville, and we had to close down the residential programs in the William Henson homes, and even sell that property. So I'm just curious, do you know in your mind, how bad did things get?
Well, what's interesting is when I came on, I didn't know any of that. And so sometimes ignorance is bliss, but I think what happens when an organization is not run to the best of its ability, it lasts for years. And so there's a trust factor that those of us that do this work, we accept your money on behalf of people that we're serving. And when we don't do that well, rightfully so, people hold back and wait and see what's going to happen with the next generation of folks that come in. And so I think that I didn't understand that for a long time. But I think once I got there, we were of a mindset that we were just going to do good as long as we could do good. And whether that was a couple of months or a year or 2 years, we didn't know. And so what's so interesting to me is that we never really had this program started out without a lot of direction and not knowing the end game. But what God was doing was different than what typically happens in a nonprofit, where you know exactly how many you're going to serve for a certain amount of time, and then it cuts off. And that's not what we were doing. We were investing in a community, investing in individuals, investing in women and families that had not had constant support for so many years. They didn't know what it looked like. And it ended up that because somehow there were enough donors that kept our doors open, that paid a salary or part-time work for me and for others. And I say others, it was probably another person most of that time. That there was consistency in the way in which we worked with folks. And without that consistency, the neighborhood doesn't trust you, the families don't trust you, you don't get to know what's going on in their lives. And there was always just enough money for us to stay open another week or another month. And I think our board had a vote twice whether to keep us open or not. And they had the courage to say, yeah, let's keep doing this. We weren't incurring a lot of debt. We were very frugal in how we provided services. We connected with every possible organization that we could connect with to bring services in or materials in or donations in. And so, and we used our own vehicles and we used our own gas. And And so those things, there were sacrifices made on part of staff to make sure that we could honor the trust that not only the donors had in us, but the trust that the community had in us.
I think that's an excellent point to make, because when you said back in the beginning that when people begin to realize that the organization is on shaky ground, they kind of then begin to withhold their financial support. And I can testify, I was one of those that did that. I wasn't sure how long Lutheran Services or Inspiritus was going to stay open. And I remember when a former staff member told me how dire things had gotten. I was on the board then. I didn't see a way out. And my response to her was, I hope you've updated your resume. And I think the commitment that you and some other staff members had to those deep friendships you were making in community, and when you saw their trust in you begin to grow, then, like you said, you were just going to continue to do good for as long as you could, whether it was a week or a month or a year. So so those were kind of the steps that you took to survive, but what actually led to Lutheran Services of Tennessee, or now known as Inspiritus? What led to their turnaround?
Well, it was a lot of hard work. You know, there's no getting around hard work. And, you know, once you build that trust and have that commitment to the work, you have to put in the work to make sure that it flourishes. And so you learn how, and I was very fortunate at my time at Second Harvest. We were small enough then to do a lot of different things. And so I learned how to track the necessary measures that funders are looking for. And I mean, grant funders are looking for. And early on, we started growing programs as well. So we had the Thursday morning program with the women. And then we started talking about nutrition education and why it's so difficult for families in low-income housing to eat well, and we figured out, you know, if we just teach people to grow their own food, then they have control over that source. And so we started a program called Healthy Families and Healthy Gardens, and brought in everything family needs to grow their own food. And that attracted the attention of some key funders, one being St. Thomas Health, which is now Ascension. And somebody like that, seeing that this program ups the nutritional value and the content of what folks in low-income housing are eating, you do things like that and attract that kind of attention, then that attracts other funders who are interested in that work as well. And so we were able to attract some of those dollars that are key for an organization to be able to continue to do the work. And that happened with several different funders throughout the tenure. So once we started a program for youth and art therapeutic services, the Predators Foundation took hold of that and raised that awareness of that work that we were doing.
I remember at our advisory board meeting last week, I noticed that of all the monies Inspiritus receives from grants, almost half of it is from St. Thomas Ascension Hospital, which I just found that to be amazing, that they're really about prevention versus intervention, and really about building healthy families instead of fixing your health when things have already gone really bad. So tell us a little bit about being a part of Inspiritus that covers multi-states, and how that has really been a boost from Inspiritus going from surviving to thriving.
Yeah. Well, you talk about that survival mode. We were the end of 2018. We had lost our uh, we didn't have enough funding to have a CEO position or executive director position, and so I was doing all the programming, and finally, the writing was on the wall. There wasn't money to pay that position, and so our CEO left to be able to get paid somewhere, earn a living. Um, and it was just me, and I had a part-time person or somebody to fill in to help with gardens and uh, and these programs that were just flourishing. And so by 2018, I was tired. I mean, something had to change, or it just wasn't going to work for another year. And about that time, we reached out. The board figured this out too, and we reached out to Lutheran Services of Georgia. And God's timing is always perfect. Sometimes seems late, but I guess it's always perfect. And they were interested in seeing ways we could work together. And throughout 2018, we kind of worked through that process to figure out, does this make sense for them? Does it make sense for us to merge and be one organization? And we decided, yes, it was John Muller's our executive or CEO of Inspiritus, which the name changed once we merged together, and just that team, having a team, one thing was such a wonderful, energizing thing to happen for our organization, for me personally. It gave us hope, and you can live off hope for a long time. And so 2019, getting our organizations merged together, finance and grants and all of those things, and then seeing this 2020, which was such an odd year for all of us, but kind of settling into being a one organization in Tennessee and in Georgia. And also we have some work in Alabama with Refugee and Immigration Services. And it's been a lifesaver for the organization, a lifesaver for me personally. And I'm just so excited to be a part of that Inspiritus team that there's great things that are on the horizon.
I think the perfect word you use there is team, because you now have people bringing skills and talents to the table that probably were not in your wheelhouse, like having someone doing marketing, having someone doing grant writing, and also just recently, John Muller announced that on the team now is someone who is doing corporate work to talk to corporations about receiving sustainable donations from different companies in our area. So I think these organizations that were scattered across several states in our Synod to join together and share those resources as a team really began to undergird the important work that you were already doing. So now that Inspiritus, as it's now called, has made that turn from surviving to thriving, give us a rundown real quick of the incredible things that Inspiritus is now doing.
Well, it's very exciting. I mean, Inspiritus in Georgia and LST already were doing some great work with Refugee and Immigration Services, and of course, the tail end of 2020 kind of dried up a lot of that work for many organizations, and thankfully, we were able to keep our Refugee and Immigration Services intact and ready to see an uptick in folks coming into the country that have waited a long time to be able to get into the country. We are hoping that work, and we have put in an application to do that work here in Middle Tennessee. And so having a team that is an expert in that work already to bring into this community is really exciting. Our disability services team is very strong in Atlanta and work with medically fragile children in our family and children services work. And so there's and then our disaster work, which really hit a peak after the March tornadoes here in Middle Tennessee, and specifically we've been in Cookeville for the past year, rebuilding houses there in that community. And recently with another flood situation that happened in the spring in Nashville, we've been working with Hands on Nashville and getting into folks' homes and clearing out debris from that work. So the vastness of the work that we do is sometimes hard to explain because there's so many avenues in which we are working with people.
So I love how you've touched on the Building Healthy Families program, the Healthy Gardens, your disaster response, and your refugee and immigration services. But the one thing you've left out is Thrive Studios. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're really excited. We've rebranded our therapeutic art services for youth in low-income communities to call Thrive Studios, which better reflects our name brand, so there's not a lot of brand confusion there. But last October, we were finally able to hire a full-time art therapist to do this work, working specifically with the youth in the public housing community where we are in North Nashville. We also have a community in South Nashville with mainly refugee children, and in Murfreesboro. And we recently completed a mural in North Nashville with the youth that reflects everything they have gone through in 2020. And beginning with the tornado and civil unrest and COVID and racial unrest and everything that they have had to deal with, we kind of forget. We think it's been difficult on adults, and it has been, but it has really affected kids, and especially in this community. And so any kind of therapeutic art services that we can provide in these communities to help kids process what they're going through is really beautiful. There's beautiful art that comes out of it, and that's great, but it's the process of the art and the resiliency it takes to get through the art process and come out on the other end. And kids just are so proud of the work that they've done, and we're really proud of the work that they've done as well.
Absolutely. And if you get a chance and you can drive by the Inspiritus offices, they have a sculpture out front that the kids made out of debris from the tornado that happened in March of 2020. So that's wonderful work too. They call it Phoenix, of how something beautiful rises up out of the ashes. So we've kind of highlighted some of the barriers that happened in the past of Lutheran Services of Tennessee, now known as Inspiritus, and things seem to be going so well, and it's a whole new landscape. But what are some of the barriers you face now in this new landscape?
Well, I think always it's getting out that communication piece of, are you communicating enough with folks to let them know what's going on? Do they know the ways that they can plug into the work that we're doing? I lose sleep at night if I have I now have people that write thank you notes, but I also still want to communicate my thanks and appreciation, especially for folks that have hung in there with us all these years. And so I think, communication, it's funny that it's a barrier because it's obviously we have more communication nowadays than we ever have in the past. And yet I think I'm old enough to really want that one-on-one or communication still. And so we find that is a barrier. And it's old and people get tired of hearing it, but when we're able to bring in more staff and continue these programs and staff up to where they need to be, finances are always, we're kicking our budgets up quite a bit, especially for next year. And so how do we tap into those resources that are out there that can help us do that, or communicate to folks who don't know what we're doing that may go, oh, they do gardens. I'm a gardener, and I understand what that means for somebody to be able to grow their own food. And so I think that's always a challenge. Are we communicating enough? Are we doing the right things to bring people in to share in this ministry?
What I really hear you saying is that you're really great about forming relationships, that's where the connections are really made. And so I'll just ask you, how are friendships formed with Inspiritus?
Well, I'll kick that back to you. You've been working with us for quite a while now, so maybe you have some insight into that.
I do. One, when I've been helping with building healthy families, everybody gets to draw a number, and if you have one, then you get to be the first person to go into the carrying closet and pick something out that you want. Trust has developed not just between those who come to building healthy families, but among themselves there in that community, that now one of the women who comes to building healthy families takes a sheet, cuts up the numbers, hands them out, and kind of keeps traffic in and out of the carrying closet going smoothly. But that didn't happen overnight. That took 10 years for that trust level to begin to develop. Just last week, I was over there helping you outdoor picnic, and I was cooking hot dogs and hamburgers on the grill. And Linda made a point of coming over and speaking to me and saying hello to me. And that just brought such joy to my heart. I don't know that a couple of years ago that would have happened. I also love the story of one of the residents of Cheatham Place is now on the board at Cheatham Place and has an input and a say. And so she has discovered her resilience and her inner strength to actually say, I can represent the people who live here to the governing bodies of Nashville and public housing authorities. Learned that one of the persons that comes to building healthy families just sitting next to her and trying to find something to talk about during the peak holiday seasons. She works at Honey Baked Hams, where her son is a manager. And so I just asked her, well, what size ham should I get for this many people who are coming to my house for Christmas? And she said, well, you come to this store and ask for me, and I'll get you a ham at a discount. And so now every year at Christmas and Easter, I go to that Honey Baked store and she hooks me up with her employee discount. So I just love that there's a give and take, how she's giving back. I think that is absolutely wonderful too. When I first started, it was tricky for me because I was only a part of the Building Healthy Families program about once a month for about an hour. And it seemed like there was a lot of ebb and flow to those who participated in that program. So I really found that one of the things I had to work really hard at and be intentional is learning their names. And and they kind of called me out on that. How long have you been coming here, Reverend Ann, and you still don't know our names? Because I'd say, get the name placards out so that I can know who you are. And so that has really, when I realized that and made that sincere effort, just to begin to form friendships with, I'm so excited about it. I love being there and being a part of it. So I look forward to bringing my homemade chocolate ice cream sauce to the event on July 1.
Yes, we
So,
look forward to that as well.
so tell us a little bit about how people can get involved.
Well, we have many ways people can get involved. One way is just the way you did, is come down on a Thursday morning and sit with our folks and get to know them, or bring lunch and help us feed the ladies and their kids that are there. I've got a list of ways to involve folks with my Canvas program by collecting art supplies, and with your church or civic organization that we can put in backpacks and give to kids to take home to do art supplies. The garden program is always in need of folks to come pull weeds for our elderly gardeners, or gardens where people have moved, and so there's a number of ways to get involved, and anybody can reach out to me at janet.arning@weinspirit.org, and we can find a way that works for your schedule and can be a presence for Inspiritus.
Absolutely. And you have a big event coming up on August 29th. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, we're going to be at Hop Springs, which is in Murfreesboro, on August 29th. We're going to spend the afternoon there. It's a beer garden, so there's lots of things to do on the site. There's hiking trails and dog trails and that sort of thing from 2:30 to 7:30. And we have a headliner and lots of folks, CJ Solar, Presley and Taylor, Mark McKay, and Liam Coleman, and Craig Campbell is our headliner there that day. And tickets begin at $10, and they can be found on our website, or information, and also just through me. Also, we can connect you with the tickets. So we would love to have as many people out, and that's going to help our disaster work in Cookeville and Nashville, and wherever else the disaster work takes us, which is many different in the southeast, and that work just continues to grow, unfortunately.
So be sure and mark August 29th on your calendars. There's going to be great bands, beer, lots of activities that you can engage in, swag and merchandising, and all to support a super duper good cause. So August 29th at Hops Beer Garden outside of Murfreesboro. Janet, it has been a delight to have you on our podcast today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Ann. We sure appreciate you, and can't wait to see you back at Building Healthy Families.